Okay, we are now live, and I'm going to admit Ethan.
All right. So this is Senate Appropriations, and we're going to be taking up H315, which is what we've been calling the fast track bill. It relates to COVID relief, and it's a way of moving money out in a way that makes it available so that we can use it to advance projects and take advantage of the spring startup or other more immediate time-sensitive needs. So what I think is the easiest way to structure our work is to pull up the bill, and we'll go through section by section and either annotate it for what we need for additional information, or if we feel we want to close it out, then we'll do that too. So Chrissy, do you want to bring that up, please? Okay, so section 1. Let me tell you, this is something that our Economic Development Committee has been working on. They're trying to establish policy parameters around the use of this money in the most targeted way possible. They're also struggling with the fact that the new federal bill includes money for business, and how do you accommodate the potential that maybe what's being proposed here would in fact these businesses could have the benefit of assistance under the new federal bill. The committee has had some input from both the Tom Cavett, our economist, as well as the auditor, and I've been talking to the chair, and our plan is to have them recommend some language around this 10 million. Now, originally, the House was going to use CRF, and in the Dear Jane letter, there is a recommendation. They say that the administration's use of general fund was intentional because there was a lack of clarity. We agree that there's a lack of clarity, but I think we can do it. The other alternative is do it the reverse, and that is if use CRF and it's not permissible, then we'll use general fund. But this is a whole section on economic recovery grants for businesses is something that I'm just going to defer today because we have the policy committee is still trying to recommend the parameters for the program. And one thing that we could do, which I threw out, it's sort of similar to what we've talked about before, and that is by the time anything could be stood up, we would have knowledge around the specificity of the latest federal bill, and we could have some language in here that basically would reference the fact that a business, in order to qualify for these grants, they would not be eligible under the business assistance that's provided in this newest federal bill. But we haven't worked that out, so we'll move on to section 2.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure, Rich.
Well, I'm very worried, in our Economic Development Committee, they're talking about the UI Trust Fund, and they're already talking about a rate increase there. Is there going to be any help from the feds to deal with unemployment there?
I thought they were talking about a rate relief.
Yes, they are in that. Rich, Michael talked earlier today. He said by 2030, we were going to have $1 billion sitting in that trust fund.
Well,
so their proposal is to actually do a rate reduction.
A rate reduction and relief.
So that this morning, Randy Brock said that they were talking about a rate increase because the trust fund was so low.
Well, then
No.
we've got to reconcile that. That's not in this bill. But what was told to us at caucus is that they were in agreement that that there should be a benefit with the to employers as they were looking out to projections. There was concern saying, well, we used projections when we did our pensions as well. And when they didn't materialize, you ended up with a pressure. So there look back or points of benchmarking actual experience before certain reductions. But I don't know what Senator Brock was mentioning, but it's not what we were told in caucus at noon.
Well, my only concern is because I had only heard from Randy, but my concern is I don't want to be giving grants out to businesses on one side when we're charging higher unemployment rates on the other. I mean, it seems weird.
Yeah, we'll have to check those numbers. Michael, I'm sure will come and talk to us about that if we need be.
That would be great.
Except we're not doing anything with the UI and
No.
we're not, that's a separate bill. So we need to get that clarified. And we're not doing anything with section 1, which is where you're seeing the disjuncture. So let's
Hey,
move.
Jane, this is Becca. I might be able to shine a little light here.
All right,
Can
great.
you hear me?
Sure.
So Senator Brock did step out of our committee meeting this morning in order to meet with the Republican caucus. And so he missed part of committee. And so Michael's report to the caucus is much more in line with where the committee is heading. So, and I know the chair did bring Senator Brock up to speed after we were done with the floor. So hopefully they're on the same page now.
Good.
All right. So, Becca, then Bobby and my recollection of what was said at caucus is consistent with what you understood when you left committee this morning.
That's correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
Good. Thank you.
All right. So let's move on to section.
Just
Two.
before we leave section 1, the source of funding for if the grants, the business grants remain in, and the source of funding, however it's structured, we may want to consider the new pot of federal dollars for that source of funding as well, because that's clearly an allowed use. And you have the mechanism that you set up in the budget adjustment.
Oh,
for,
we absolutely want to do that, Stephanie.
Yeah.
And any place that we can, we will want to
utilize
exercise that flexibility, right? So, but that's when we get some recommended language there. Okay, the second is the 10 million to Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. And I want to break this into 2 pieces in terms of what's in the fast track and what was on the governor's list for housing in the budget itself. Gus, when he came in, talked about the 20 million in general fund that the governor was proposing and using it for projects that would be eligible for tax credits and leveraging of other dollars, so that 20 million for housing, in fact, would translate into a total of 80 million. The House Appropriations Committee was really concerned about moving forward and making some immediate progress on just our housing inadequacy, and that we had the testimony about the, I think 74 apartments that could be acquired, as well as some improvements in the St. Albans homeless shelter. And so the House, knowing that there were 2 things, one was dollar for dollar, you don't get the leveraging, and that would be to address the immediate, and then the other would be the leveraged money to that would be the 20 million parlayed into 80. I think with the amount of money we have, we need to keep it, recognize that we're not recommending that we reduce the 20 million to be parlayed into 80, but that we would want to use 10 million here and then leave open the 20 million for the big bill. So this is 10 million of Corona relief funds, and it really is, the intent is to move quickly and to bring in more housing resources immediately to families who are without permanent housing or in need of emergency housing.
Sounds good.
So I just want to make it clear, I think there was concern, and I think Gus would be concerned about saying, well, your 20 million that you wanted to parlay into 80, we're taking 10 million of it. And so you can only do, and it would cut your capacity to 40 million. I think that's what he would be concerned about. And I don't want to, I think in this budget environment, we can really look at moving ahead on this and not reducing the proposed amount for other housing initiatives.
Yep.
So does that sound okay to people? Not to have the 10 million in addition to the 20, as far as we are in this budget process so far.
Right. I'd vote for that.
Senator Sears?
No, I'm fine with it. I was just found I was muted and I was just agreeing with Star again.
Oh.
I hope he'll do well by me soon.
All right. Well, we'll make sure. So we're going to keep that the way it is, knowing that it allows us to VHCB to move forward immediately on these particular. There may be others, but those were the two that we heard about that were pretty much ready to go. All right. So section 2, we'll close that out.
Right.
Sounds good.
Okay. Section 3. I know that our Health and Welfare Committee is going to be reviewing these proposals. And we didn't get any communication on this. Emergency outreach services grants, if we could scroll down some more, it's 300,000 to really address COVID related needs. We know that there's a lot of the circumstances have really been hard on people, and in terms of mental health and stress and so forth. So this would be to put some additional money into mental health to have these peer-led and member-led organizations work. And oftentimes, as we know, these are populations that where we probably the prospect of health disparities is very present. So 300,000 for the Department of Mental Health for emergency outreach.
Is that supposed to take care of their issues? Because I know they're in bad shape.
No, this does nothing to deal with the underlying chronic underfunding of their overall appropriation. This is really recognizing the need for emergency outreach services in this environment right now. So no, this does nothing to address that fundamental funding issue.
So we're going to wait and do that in the big bill?
If we can, that's one of our things. I think that there are a number of areas where we have base funding issues or needs that are not addressed in the governor's proposed budget. And the three that we talked about the most are mental health, our home and community-based waiver, the choices for care, which are residential care, adult days, nursing, nutrition programs. And then the third is our state college system and what funding has been recommended in that select committee report. So those are challenges for us to think about how we might be able to address those needs in the big bill. So this is much more short-term. It's related to emergency outreach.
Right on.
So I think unless I hear something, we'll close that out and move on to section 4.
Close out with just that same caveat on the source of funds.
Yes,
'cause
and then
I
section
haven't used-
4, this has been a topic of discussion with our mental health agencies, and I'm going to leave this open right now. It appears we're not. I've asked what is this intended to do, and I've heard back from several mental health agencies that that this is not. If we think this is helping our mental health delivery system, it's not, and that what they would like the 4 million to be used for would be grants that would help them with some of the one-time needs that would actually help them on their bottom line pressure. I was talking to Mary Moulton, and they have their elevator isn't working. So people with disabilities are having trouble accessing services, or it could be the group homes that need some attention or whatever. So they're recommending that the grants be used in such a way that there's some long-term investment or benefit to their structure, which would include both the designated agencies, which are mental health, and the specialized service agencies that serve the IDDS population. So we need to look at that a bit more. But what is here, if we think that this is helping deal with the fiscal pressures that our mental health agencies are under, this doesn't do it. Alice?
I'm hoping it will do some more placements for people who are sitting in the emergency room, which I just had an incident over, not this weekend, the weekend before. 27-year-old young woman had a psychotic breakdown. They were her family's very involved. She had been living with their daughter and her young children. Anyway, she couldn't return there because of this condition. And so at Friday, they went to the emergency room in Springfield. The father of the 27-year-old called me. He's staying overnight in Springfield to try and keep her calm. She was there, of course, all weekend. I had to call Morning Fox, get him involved to find her a placement because she couldn't get into the retreat for an evaluation. She wouldn't go voluntarily, of course. And they had a very hard time finding a place for her. There were 2 places in the whole state that she maybe could have gone to. One was all men, which wasn't appropriate. And the other was someplace else. So I finally got her a former social worker set up something in a private home to take her. But, it was sitting in the emergency room all weekend long at the hospital, which is very common, of course.
It is very common. And the way this is written,
could it not support some more of those placements? Can it? I don't
this is going to be rewritten.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's for housing supports. But I think what you're talking about are crisis beds, Alice.
Yeah, I think, they determined she wasn't, even though she had taken a swing at the doctor, she wasn't bad enough off to do an involuntary commitment. So she needed something less restrictive.
I guess we would have to get some clarification from the Department of Mental Health in terms of what that would do.
I need a lot of clarification on this. I've probably gotten more emails from different folks on this particular budget item than any other item in this bill. My concern is this one-time money, right?
Yes.
So but it's also, isn't that building a base where one would expect that we're going to continue this 4 million? I mean, if these are people who are without a home because of COVID, be one thing, but I'm concerned that we're building on the base that we don't even have enough. I mean, I am really, I want to help people who are hurting due to COVID in this bill. And people are hurting, but I don't want to build a base when I've got some groups saying we need to deal with the pension, other groups with the Vermont State Colleges, another group who wants us to deal with childcare. And all of these groups are requiring new general fund money. And if we do this 4 million here, and then next year it's another 4 million,
I don't,
that's what I'm concerned with.
you've got your hand, what you're talking about isn't a concern, because we know that there are desires to expand programs, and on an ongoing basis. And the minute we expand programs, then that puts more competition in place to support what we already are underfunding. And so you're absolutely right, Senator Sears. We have to be very careful, and that's why this section needs to be redone to be so that it's in the form of one-time grants for those very kinds of activities that benefit the service delivery structure, and don't in any way create an ongoing expectation of funding, because underneath it, and that's one of the things that's so hard with this, infusion of so much federal money, it tends to obscure the fact that our base revenues, once we come out of this one-time money, we're back to that fiscal reality where we are in that chronic underfunding environment. So the minute we start adding something new or expanding, we're doing it at the expense of making our underfunding of these systems worse.
But I'm going to question whether the Department of Mental Health is the right place for this too.
It isn't. This isn't even going to. This is being replaced. This is what I'm telling you. If we want to provide some one-time ways of financially helping our mental health delivery system, and that includes our specialized agencies, it would be in the form of one-time expenditures that give long-term benefit, but do not create an expectation of ongoing or an obligation for ongoing support. And this is what this does. You've raised the very concern. And so I've got some other language that we might want to consider, but I just want to let you know, number 4 is very much an open section.
Okay.
For all the reasons that you've talked about, and I understand the advocacy for it, but I think we've just got to keep saying to people that we are going to be vigilant, that anything that's is creating an expectation or demanding ongoing funding for something to expand, that will make it more difficult or impossible for us to deal with those unfunded or those existing budgetary pressures, we're probably not going to do it. So this is still all part of 4. It's very
It is.
okay. So we might as well just keep moving, because we're going to probably end up with something different here. This is again to hire case management to address the additional caseload. Do you want to hold this too, and have the health and welfare take a little more, give us their thoughts?
Well, do these people exist? My agency's having a hard time finding clinicians. They're I'm assuming a case manager is somewhat clinician style. I don't know if the people will be able to find the people to work in these.
Well, maybe we can get something from the Department of Mental Health, Stephanie. Well, actually, we've got the administration listening, because I agree, Senator Sears, for the period of time that we're hoping that we are going to be out of this emergency situation, would we be able to even hire the staff necessary for 6 months or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I would like, if this is something that the mental health department could give us like a brief white paper, because it's basically giving every agency, regardless of size. So you've got some agencies that are both DAs and SSAs, and they get one person, and then others that are only a DA gets one, and the SSA gets one. I don't know what the analysis is behind it in terms of, what has been the estimate around the caseload data or anything like that. So if we could get something, or maybe health and welfare will do that for us, but I think we ought to just hold that one open as well.
This is also one, if it is tied to the COVID caseload, and it stretches through the period, it would be eligible for the new federal funding as well. So,
Yes.
same is true of the next section, I believe.
Section 6.
Yep.
Instead of from the general fund, it would
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
Is there okay. We should be doing this for nursing home workers too, when you think
I should
about.
be doing this for all people that are working in this stressful situation. This is absolutely, I don't know who's, I'll keep my mouth shut.
There is in the new federal bill, grant funding for strike forces for the long-term care facilities. I don't know how long it will take to, have those dollars, come out, but there's actually, in the federal bill, there's a dedicated source of funds for.
I think I'm
this
really
type of-
troubled by not having other social service agencies. What about probation and parole officers? What about people that are working in the field and residential treatment centers for troubled youth, working under DCF contracts? What about the people working in nursing homes we just mentioned? I think this is really, I find this to just do mental health is ignoring. What about all those people trying to work through very difficult situations at my Turning Point Club in Bennington? Trying to work with recovering in their
Well, this-
stress.
I don't even
This
know what.
really, I'm really disappointed that the House would single out one set of workers and not.
I'm not sure that they are. It says for frontline healthcare workers.
Yeah.
So like emergency personnel.
No, it
trauma
says trauma-informed and trauma-specific care for mental health professionals responding to surges in mental health needs. So it is mental health workers.
Well, is it up above? Am I missing the title? Go back up a little.
Well, it says healthcare workers, then it describes mental health workers.
Workforce training and wellness supports. Let's move down. Goes to mental health for training and wellness support for frontline healthcare workers, such as emergency department personnel, responding to an increase, trauma-informed. So it looks like it's for mental health. It looks like it could be emergency department personnel, and it looks like it could be for any frontline healthcare worker.
I agree with Dick. I think it's a little more targeted to mental health overall.
Is it because mental health would be looked at as a provider of these services?
Yeah, I think so.
as opposed to just the employees. I don't, it seems like 150,000, if we looked at the number of employees in all these healthcare related frontline healthcare workers, it's thousands.
Yeah,
Is there a program? Is there a module? Is there, Stephanie, we need, or this didn't come from the administration, so I can't ask them to provide, their justification, but I think we need to have a little bit more understanding what this 150,000 would do for whom. Is it is it organized training? Is it what kind of support?
I wouldn't even just, 150,000 wouldn't cover just the emergency room nurses.
Right.
It's not very much.
Jane,
Yes.
have we, to date, have we funded any kind of wellness supports for any group?
Oh,
Because I know we've done, support checks to frontline workers, but it seems like this would be breaking new ground for one part of the workforce. But if we get in the business of providing wellness supports for stress, anxiety, and trauma in a pandemic, it seems like pretty soon you're going to have requests from everybody because everybody's involved in the pandemic.
I think what we're saying is 150,000. It's not clear exactly what this would buy. It's not clear how many, how it would be delivered. It's not clear how many individuals would be served, and where this came from. So I'm going to set it aside, and I'm sure whoever's listening will give us some rationale for it. But it really, at this point in the pandemic, I don't know, in response to your question, Senator Baruth, I can't remember off the top of my head. Stephanie, do you remember, have we?
I don't think we have really on the sort of the wellness side. We clearly did some support of EMTs last year for training. But it was, I think, viewed more technical than sort of the emotional wellness support.
Yeah.
Because
except for the bill that we just did.
S42.
S42 is really an effort to recognize the what that means. But those are, I mean, like when you have the 5-way, the 5 kids get killed in an automobile accident. Those are pretty traumatic events. I guess this is the question. Rather than our conjecture, I'm going to set it aside, because it seems to me that, yes, we may have a lot of money, but if we need to be clear that we're doing our due diligence and we know exactly what it is that we're intending to fund here, who is benefiting, what will be provided. And if we were asked, what did this 150,000 achieve, that we would have some sense of what that would be at some point. So I think we need more information based on what people are saying.
It almost seems like somebody was trying to fit a certain amount of money into this particular box. And they had 150 left over and said this would be a good idea.
Well, it does, based on what we have here, it's real. You're right, Senator Sears. It's hard to understand the genesis.
If I look at section 7, I haven't read the whole thing yet, but clearly they're saying, tell us how you're going to use this money.
Well, then I think we need to hear from mental health regarding it, and the letter that we received, the Dear Jane letter, which you all have, really doesn't make any reference at all to these sections. The only, the only emphasis are the business grants in section 1. And then the other is the pensions. And we have a lot on that, although there wasn't anything in the governor's budget on pensions, but other than what got built into the base, but in terms of addressing the underfunding. So, all right, I think we have a little bit more work before people feel comfortable that we know what that money is for and what the Department of Mental Health has for a position on it as it relates to the responsibilities that they're given here and report back. So, Ethan, I know you're there.
Yes,
Are you making notes of this?
I am, and I'd be happy to reach out to Commissioner Squirrel.
Okay, that would be very
for some
helpful.
analysis and answers. Okay.
Because you can see we're really struggling here to try to figure out what
Yes.
the intent is and feel comfortable that we know how the money would be used and what the benefit would be. Okay, section 8. Supports for new Americans, refugees, and immigrants. This is, once again,
Yeah, we talked about this one quite a bit.
I think we did, and we also know that there's so much data around health disparities and the challenges of reaching out to populations regarding getting immunized, translation, etc.
Can we add new Americans and old Americans? New and old?
Not for this, Bobby.
Yeah, you're in.
Could you go back to the heading, please? Supports for new Americans, refugees, and okay. So we've got the COVID related and testing and vaccines. We've got literacy for children and telemedicine. Do you? Okay, and this would be case management. Would any of these, Stephanie, fall back under the new possible coverage with that new funding?
Well, definitely section 8, the new Americans, because it's in as drafted here in relation to COVID. And the grants for the ReachUp, the assistance to households is directly an allowed use. So the ReachUp piece would also, I've listed them all on my list of possible, and the structure that we might do around the timing of the new federal dollars. But
Okay.
these are clearly ones that might switch from general fund to the new source.
All right. But
Jane,
it's to help these populations with making sure that they're connected with benefit programs and that their children, case management, et cetera. Now, what agencies are going to?
So it's direct to AHS central office, and then it's evenly distributed to the Association of Africans Living in Vermont and the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants. So it's just a pass-through grant
Okay.
of entities.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there other entities, or are those the right ones? Are there more, or are those the right ones? I don't. I'm just want to make sure we haven't left an organization out that would say, that they have a special ability to work with one of these groups. That's all. Senator Baruth.
I was going to say those are the two I'm used to seeing from the Burlington Winooski perspective. They are the two that are usually in
Okay.
charge.
All right.
So Jane, this is
Yes.
this is Becca. Just one of the things that I've been thinking about as we go through this section is as we look to swap out the state funds for plugging in the federal funds, just for us to be mindful of any aspects of it that are more time specific and more that may not wait for us to get that money from the feds. So I know you're acutely aware of that. I just wanted to sort of make that internal conversation in my head more explicit, that I know that that's a part of this.
Mhm. Yeah, we know that the CRF is the one that's got the time constraint. That right now this is
Right.
funded through CRF.
Yeah.
The question becomes one if it's more advantageous for us to use a different funding source to have the flexibility to do so, but all within the CRF still comes with that, even though it's been extended deadline for expenditure. Yeah. Okay. And if you notice, there's different funding. So some of it's general fund, depending on the section, or other is CRF funds. But we may find we have more flexibility with the CRF. But the other thing is then how we use CRF, or the way in which we can swap it out for general fund, which then helps us as we're looking at, particularly if we want to maximize funding to help deal with pensions, for example.
Right.
So there's a lot of movement here.
Such a puzzle.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to suggest we close this out. This seems to be the two, we've got the right, people feel these are the right organizations. If we don't, I'm sure we'll hear, and that that these are the support services that are here, are ones that these two agency organizations are very familiar and can provide to this constituency. So I'm going to suggest, unless there are further questions, that we would move on, and we'll close this one out for the time being.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Grants to ReachUp. Okay. And once again, this is doing a one-time, another one-time appropriation to this group. For people who aren't familiar with the ReachUp program, and probably you are, Phil, even though you're new to the committee, this is assistance to families with children. And I think the current benefit for a family of 3 or 4 is like $740 a month. So these are actually the poorest families that we have, and they have not had the benefit. I think even with this new round of, and I wanted to check on this, but the new round of food stamps, because they're probably at the maximum already, they're not going to pick up anything on that round either of enhanced food stamp benefits. Do you have a sense of that, Stephanie?
Again, 15%.
What? Because remember, we did a one-time payment, and we did it for food stamp beneficiaries who had, because they were already at the higher payment level, weren't getting much, none or very little advantage for that food stamp increase to the maximum amount. And so we did a payment for that
A
group.
supplemental
Yeah.
payment.
Didn't the feds agree for a 15% bonus for EBT?
But I don't know if that dealt with that maximum cap.
Yeah.
Rich. That's what I'm asking.
I can ask, I'll ask UCF that on the SNAP side. But this also, the House ended up splitting the funding source of this between CRF and general fund. But this is also, either this type of supplemental payment, which we did through CRF, or the supplemental nutrition payment, depending on if that's something you want to have in this bill, is again likely to be eligible under the new federal funding source as well. So,
yeah, the reason I mentioned the food stamp population, or the 3 squares as it's now, is that picks up other beneficiaries, like our SSI population, We tend to forget, but there used to be two very large benefit programs. One was the Aged, Blind, and Disabled program, which SSI replaced. They have been getting some increases in their federal benefit, but the reason we were looking at that food stamp 3 squares population was that it did pick up, it was a broader population of helping than the ReachUp families, although we did both, frankly. So right now, this is being proposed for the ReachUp. And this also, okay, all right.
So they'll do a little over a million and a quarter.
Yeah, the combination between the two funding.
Yep.
But I'm just pointing out, it means that there are other families or households that could be individuals without children, but they are seniors, or they are an individual with disabilities receiving SSI, which is a form of public assistance, just to a different population that we are not doing it just to the ReachUp program does not address.
Okay.
And I don't know, most of the, I do know that not every ReachUp family gets food stamps, but I think it's pretty high percentage. So I just bring it up as the fact that this deals with children and families and children receiving ReachUp benefits, but it does not at all provide or recognize this other group of very poor Vermonters. So I don't know whether I'll just set it aside for now, but for doing it through ReachUp, our people, these are very poor families, and they're under a lot of stress. There's no question about that.
I would go for it and get it off the list here. I mean, we haven't got much more we can do to it, have we?
No.
No, let's go for it.
All right. So Bobby's saying, let's close out section 9. And
Can
he
I just
doesn't care
ask-
about doing, my only point is,
Yeah.
we need to be cognizant that there are other
Yes.
sectors of very poor Vermonters who don't participate in this program and therefore are not being addressed. That's the only point I want to make the committee aware
Yeah.
of.
But there isn't any reason why they couldn't participate in this if they signed up, is there?
Well,
Oh,
there
yes, there are all
yes.
kinds.
are
Oh, yes.
requirements.
There are all kinds of requirements. This is the old Aid to Families with Dependent Children program.
Yep.
And if you want to go back really far, it was Mother's Aid.
Mhm. So Jane, how do we get at that other population? Are you thinking in a different, not this vehicle, in a different bill? Because I certainly well aware from meeting with our representatives from Cove, there's a huge percentage of elderly Vermonters living in poverty that don't fall under this. So if we park it, I want to come back to it, I guess is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess what we can leave it open. We could look at doing like what we did before with 3 squares, which is a broader net
Mhm.
of very poor households. But that may take more money. And so yes, you're right, Becca. You understand my point is that this is obviously helpful to these households, but it doesn't necessarily help the households that that you had your conversation around Cove. And these would be very poor elderly Vermonters or Vermonters with disabilities severe enough so that they are getting SSI.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they mostly would be covered under 3 squares.
My point is though, if that 15% is up to the max as opposed to an add-on, is it like we encountered the first time that if you're already at the max, then it didn't help you at all? So the
Right.
poorest families didn't get any benefit.
Right,
Okay,
yeah, yeah.
So that we need to clarify that, if we could. And Ethan, you making a note of that one too?
And I've sent that same question to DCF and Sean. And
Okay. Okay.
am.
Great.
Okay. The food bank. We had this request and it was because the federal government had that special contract and was with an out of state, and they moved it away. It was with the Abbey Group at first for those, the food box program, and then they had distribution problems. So food bank stepped in, and we had a request that came from the food bank to pay for the cost of their providing the program, the fund for January, February.
Okay.
Nutrition, certainly. Now,
is this where we would add?
that's
the
what I was
diapers?
going to say. This is where we need to have our discussion around assistance for diapers.
Oh, yeah.
I put the 80 some odd thousand in for the diapers too.
So what we would do is to pay for the box programs for January and February, and the distribution of diaper, whatever language we used in the earlier bill when we did the funding. And it went through the food bank out through as we know, it went out to parent-child centers. The diapers seem to have made their way.
Yeah,
So-
it went out to all the parent-child centers to distribute.
So, so that request came in afterwards. The House Health Human Services Committee Chair communicated a desire to have that assistance continued for these families with infants. And this would be, it seems to me, consistent with, if we want to do it, this is a section that we would do it in the same way that we provided this benefit previously. So are people comfortable providing,
Absolutely.
continuing the benefit? Okay. And we'll add,
Question-
I think, 85 maybe
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, 85 would cover it.
And can I ask Senator Westman, when it did go previously, the parent-child centers, how many months did that cover?
I can't remember.
Okay,
I can get you the total, and I can get you the request.
that would be great. Thank you.
And Stephanie has their request that is the total of it comes up to 82, so 85 would.
The last time we got it was from a group, it was the Diaper Bank group.
Yep.
This came through from a parent-child center that was saying the money's gone and the need is still there. So it took a different route this time. And so
Okay.
Becca, I'm not sure, the last appropriation was, I think, 82,000. And I don't
Okay.
know how long a period that covered, to be honest. If, in other words, there's been a gap, or whether
This-
it's gone through now and they're just saying, please continue it.
So will this be statewide?
Yes, it's statewide.
Yes.
Yeah.
Know that it will be,
This will purchase 500,000 diapers.
and they'll be distributed statewide.
Right. Uh-huh.
It came from the Champlain Valley Diaper Bank, did the whole request for the whole state.
Okay.
Okay, great.
You mean just now? Because you got,
No, that's what it's the Junior League
The
of the
Junior
Champlain
League.
Valley, and it's the Diaper Bank.
So is the
Yeah.
Junior League doing this too?
They put in the request, and they
are you
sent
talking
the,
about the current one, Rich, or the original?
the current one, and they sent the request February 17th to the chair of the House Human Services Committee, and in the course of the rush, she wasn't able to, wasn't able to convey that to appropriations in a timely enough manner so they could deal with it.
Okay, because the email that you were, that I saw was the one from Lamoille.
Yep, but Lamoille was included within the overall totals
Okay.
in the amount. And this is designed to purchase 537,222 diapers.
22, well, okay, so I
There
think
you
what
go.
we'll do is we will agree that we want to continue this benefit. And I don't know if the request to Human Services gave the information that people, the questions, when did the money run out? But it doesn't matter. I guess it's just how long a period of time would this 82,000 get us through? Would it be pretty much through the pandemic? Is it for 3 months, 5 months? I don't have a sense of that.
I'm trying to read through. Stephanie does have this.
I do have I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go.
Yep, she
Even
probably hasn't had a chance.
after the pandemic ends, children still need diapers. So I think if it's 82,000 or whatever, we'll just add it here and hope that it gets us through and maybe a bit beyond if we're lucky.
The last time we did 50,000 that was granted to this group was in late summer. And they said it was invaluable and has allowed us to continue to meet the greater increased demand.
Yeah, well, we did it through the food bank, so.
And we did it through the food bank. And it was and distributed 100,000 diapers through 9 agencies.
But it doesn't tell you how a period of time that the benefit
It doesn't tell me that.
Okay. Well, it doesn't matter. Obviously, the money's gone now, and the infants are out there, and the need for diapers is ongoing. So I'm going to suggest we add the additional money that was requested here in Section 10, and it'll go out in the same way the original 50,000 did. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
11.
Let me switch back to.
Okay, to
You
for a
had
technology training program.
So these are, you had done a similar amount of funding in either the Q1 bill or one of the.
So this continues to, okay. People comfortable with that to help this population?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Green Mountain Care Board, this is data collection. I had one question, Ethan. We were trying to be very careful when we were looking at anything to do with racial disparity, health disparity, and having it reviewed by Susanna Davis. And do you have a sense of whether these sections she's had a look at this? Because we did fund out of one of the appropriations money for her office to develop that dashboard to help us on an ongoing basis to collect data, to really measure progress or where we needed to really focus attention on health disparities. And so do you know whether, I just want to make sure that anything we're doing here aligns with what she's done or is in addition to, that's my only question here.
I do not know if she's reviewed this, but I can ask her and get back to you.
Okay, that's all I wanted to ask.
Okay.
And obviously I don't know, Stephanie, do you have a sense of where did these estimates come from?
I do not know beyond that they were recommendations recommendation from the House Healthcare Committee. I'm sorry.
Is there a white paper? In other words, did the Green Mountain Care Board make a request and say 60,000 is what we need to do the VCURES work?
I will check in with Nolan and Jen and find out if that.
If we could, it would be nice to know what, what is the source of the requested money.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
I think I could at least add to that. This, I believe, and I'm checking as I'm talking to you, was part of their initial budget submission when they came to speak to Finance and Management in the late fall.
Uh-huh.
And we were able to make them happy in some ways. We were not able to make them happy in every way. And I think this was one of the ways we elected not to do. But I can tell you that I'm pretty sure this was part of their budget submission. So I think these numbers come from them.
Okay, if you could just confirm that, Adam, that would
Yeah.
be great. We just don't have any context for them to know
Yes.
the source. And obviously they weren't, your letter didn't have any reference to those sections.
Right.
So I'm assuming that they're acceptable from the administration's perspective. But I just wanted to make sure that because of the work that we did on health disparities and the funding in the past and the dashboard that we were going to model that Susanna Davis had felt was a good model. I think it came from New Mexico. I just wanted to make sure that what we were doing here was consistent. If, sometimes we find there's disjuncture that we never intended.
Right.
Okay, well, if you could just confirm that would be helpful, Adam, because, the only thing we have to work from is just what's in the bill here.
Right.
Okay, this is very familiar to us, section 13. Is there any advantage, Stephanie, were you thinking that this might be another area where we would replace the CRF with something else?
Yeah, this is another area where we want to the extent that we can maximize FEMA dollars, there'll be some technical language corrections to this section. We would want to do that, but it might be a place where we want to swap out for the new federal dollars because it's clearly a COVID response expenditure, and then the CRF dollars could be swept back in, and we have the mechanism that we set up in the BAA for actually, using the CRF to swap out in areas where we could maximize the general fund. So
Right.
And
both the technical corrections and the stacking of how we want to identify this, potentially identify the source of funds for this. And maybe change this 15 million to a different source.
going directly to the schools as well. Can that play a role in this?
That's a different animal.
I know, but could we look at that also or no? I mean,
Well, it
Yeah,
might be a
it's-
bigger conversation about, the,
right.
if you want to introduce timing wise, it might be a different conversation in terms of getting, the idea here is that you would be getting the HVAC stuff done as the schools close down in the spring. You'd have that in line. But there's a lot of questions about, the help that you would, the direction you could hopefully potentially give to the schools, because there is a lot of money going directly to the districts. There's an ESSER 3 part of the new federal bill.
Are we wanting them to give out the school names? I mean, I thought that was part of their.
Well, they said Efficiency Vermont, they were clear that because they come under their utility requirements
Right.
that they couldn't.
They said no one had refused to disclose their name.
They just have to get permission, that's all. I think it's very hard to say, well, because how much have we got in there? 100 million that we've already spent on HVAC. Well, how much have we spent, Stephanie?
Oh, I think it's $16 or $18 million. I have to go
Isn't it more than
On the
that? Oh, maybe not.
No, that's just on the HVAC piece. You actually had like you took some of the money back, but the total amount to schools was much higher than that.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm thinking of was the
Yeah.
total.
Yeah, but the HVAC component piece, I think it was 16 or $18 million so far, and this would add to it.
This allows us to move forward with the remaining schools that were in the pipeline, and the timing just was the problem. So I think the discussion that the issue you're raising, Alice, is a much larger one, and that is how we influence or how the money that's going out directly to schools through that funding mechanism.
Yeah, this has a timeline on it for,
What?
this does have time frame that it should be done within so that kids can get back into those schools.
Yeah. And so what it's doing is using this funding source and treating all the schools through Efficiency Vermont in the same way.
Yeah.
And this finishes them up.
Yeah.
Which I think we want.
What about all the schools like my little school in Troy, Vermont? We went and bonded a couple of years ago and did all of our own work we're paying the bill as we go. I mean,
Well, no good deed goes unpunished, Bobby.
well, I just, I think some of these places are milking the system pretty well. And, you get sick of that after a while.
Well, if I might,
Yes, go ahead, Senator Baruth.
Bobby, I agree with you that there are some districts that defer maintenance, defer, and then wait for someone to bail them out.
Until some disaster hits, and then they come down and I'm not saying that, Phil, about yours in Burlington. That was a complete, I think, surprise to everybody.
But I will say that this HVAC program, the beauty of it is HVAC is one of those things that everybody was behind on. And now we had this federal money swoop in and basically take care of the entire state's problem. Not 100%, but every school in the state pretty much is going to enjoy an upgrade. So I think it's distributed equitably, this particular program. But in general, I see what you're saying. There are some that are not paying their fair share year after year after year.
Well, I just want to make sure the kids get back to school where they should have probably have been all winter. I mean,
I think that's the goal, is to get kids back in schools, and ultimately it all comes out of under a statewide funding arrangement.
but don't forget what Peter told us. So they got another 300 million coming in this new bill for schools.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Didn't he tell us that when that Thursday he was with us, that there was going to be 300 million coming to Vermont for?
And we've had, that is absolutely true. And so one of the challenges is how we as a legislature, the education committees, can help provide resources and to make sure that that money is utilized in the best way possible, whether we are talking about the maintenance that needs to be done, or the water system, or other capital improvements, or curriculum development. I don't know, whatever is permissible, but so we are well aware that that money is flowing out directly to schools, and how to provide maybe some guidelines or recommendations around how this money in fact could be used to address both some chronic needs and that would have long-term benefit, because it is a lot. So Senator Sears, you have your little yellow hand
Yes,
up.
I have my little yellow hand, which I will lower now.
Oh,
Thank you. I would want to expand this conversation to other facilities, including courthouses. And I don't think we will have the recommendations from the judiciary yet, but if Stephanie, I did speak with Pat Gable yesterday and talked to her about the possibility of updating some of the county courthouses and other courthouses for their HVAC systems. I also want to point out something. One thing that's happened to me this year is I haven't had my annual winter cold. I haven't had my annual other winter problems that I created by having to sit in a small committee room in the State House. And as this money becomes available, I think we should really consider, and I realize that the size of committee rooms is going to be an issue, but I really think that we would be, it would be in everybody's best interest from a health point of view to re-examine the airflow within the building. It's in the State House. It is a mess, and anybody who sits in committee rooms on a regular basis knows. And this is will be the first January that I've gone through without a significant cold and bronchitis. That's 29 years worth of them, and they're all created from sitting in those little committee rooms. And we call people in who don't know they're sick or know they're sick, but they come in anyway because they feel a responsibility to do that. So I put that plug in.
Well, maybe we could just keep using masks, but the
Well,
reality
that
is,
obviously helps. I mean, obviously there are a lot of things that I realize that, but I do think the air quality, particularly in the Senate Appropriations Committee room, if I might say, is particularly poor in there. They've done tests, and I think that's why certain members would regularly fall asleep.
hopefully not the chair. The whole issue around the State House and space, legislative management committees, just maybe Becca wants to expand on it a little bit more, but it's a topic of discussion, and this federal money can be used for capital improvements. So that is on the list.
We're definitely looking at that for sure, Senator Sears.
Let's put a new wing on the back then and do something for ourselves for a change instead of everybody else.
Well, I was talking about the airflow, Bobby. It really is bad in many of the rooms. And
It is.
I honestly believe Senate Appropriations and probably Government Ops and
Our
Transportation.
committee
are
room
probably
was
in there.
great with two great big windows. I didn't
Yes.
know we were, huh?
I would
Oh,
give my right arm
when you're
for
able to
that.
open them, they're great. But when you're not able to open the windows,
I know. Well, so the whole issue around capital improvement, I suggested maybe we could just finally deal with the fact that we've got a women's prison. We should use the money and build something rather than keep planning and analyzing. So,
well, I thought somebody sent me an email that I think you got a copy of regarding the women's prison that was actually fairly intelligent.
I know, I know that there are other minds than ours pondering this, but the federal money does provide some opportunity here. So we're going to have to make some decisions about how it can be allocated. You know, obviously pensions are going to be there, but capital needs, whether it's for the legislative, the committees, the health of the committee, but I want to get back to finishing up through Efficiency Vermont, these projects for schools. I think it's something that we've talked about. We felt it made sense, and we should move forward on it.
Good.
So I realize it's kind of precipitated other discussion, but are people ready to close that out?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
regrettably.
Section 14, a minor little one. This is what the House did was to just reserve the funding. I know the treasurer wanted to have written commitment about amount of payments that would be committed to out into the future for many years. There was a reluctance to do that on the part of the House, so they came up with allocating money in the form of reserve for pre-funding. And it was a topic of great, most of the governors, or not the governors, Secretary Young's letter. And I don't know,
Do we
maybe
have-
since we've got Adam here, you'd like to share what you think the administration would be recommending. You want us to strong, unwavering resolve on the part of legislative leadership to make progress on liabilities well before the end of the session. And a committee to develop a plan. Are you saying you're that there are options underway, so we don't need another committee, and you're willing to look forward, but I don't know how to take any of that content and take it with what you want to, what you view the 20 million does or does not do. If you want to expand on that or make it a little bit more specific, obviously we appreciate the immediacy, but the House, and I certainly know that there was concern about the language that the treasurer was requesting that really put forward a future year commitment of a very significant, I think it was as much as 10%. So that was the reluctance to do it in a fast track bill, and yet wanting to give some kind of positive affirmation on the part of the legislature around addressing the funding.
Right.
So I wasn't sure, you want that pulled out? You want additional funding? I really, because the governor did not propose any specific funding.
The governor fully funded the ADEC.
I know
as
that,
you
but
know,
I mean, addition to
and
the underfunding.
we did not put additional funding in there. But when we were drawing up the budget, we were aware that the treasurer was drawing up a plan that she was going to present roughly the same time we presented the budget. So we put full funding of the ADEC, both for the teachers and the state employees, in the budget, assuming that part of that funding, to the extent that there is a plan that lowers the ADEC either this year or in future years, part of that extra money could be used to put towards the pensions. But I think what this letter addresses, Madam Chair, and I know the secretary has had conversations with the pro tem and the speaker on this. We support fully the idea that the treasurer is looking for changes to the systems. We know that she's put some options on the table. We think she's taken, she's using some political capital there, and we admire the fact that many of those decisions are difficult, and we just want to support, her work. And I know that she's working with the Senate and the House to fine tune that. Where I guess maybe the underlying or the message of the letter is that probably before putting money out there, we need to put a plan forward, and we're anxiously awaiting the plan. We know that the legislature is working on it as I speak.
So we have a timing issue relative to the fast track, the work of the committee. Are you recommending not putting the 20 million in the language in? Let it go as part of that, it's one thing you could do is recognize that you would deal with some of this funding with the bill that I think the House Government Ops is taking the lead on reviewing those potential modifications to the pensions. So our problem is at this point in this process, using this bill, it seems to pose some timing and logistical issues. That seems to be what I'm struggling with.
Right. And, to be clear, if we wanted to remove the $20 million, we would have said so in the letter. And
Great.
so where our recommendation is not to remove that, but our recommendation is to the extent that the clock runs out on the fiscal year and there is no plan, that money should be reappropriated elsewhere. Because we think it has to go along with a plan, a long-term plan that'll make our retirement system sustainable. And without the plan, the money really is not useful. So, but we're not, if we were recommending removing it, we would have said so.
Okay, Senator Sears, you've got your hand up.
Yes. I'm concerned about the 20 million, leaving it in, frankly. I'm more concerned by a date of May 30th. Do we plan to be here until again this year for a long stay? Because May 30th, usually we are adjourned by the middle of May. So if we're gonna solve the problem or have a plan by May 30th, most of us will be gone. Unless that's, I don't know when, nobody knows when adjournment is, and last year obviously was an unusual year. So I'm a little concerned about why the House put it May 30th. That's usually we would do something May 1st or whatever.
Well, I think this is a section that I'm just looking, it's almost 3:30. It's going to need a lot more attention. And that's a good point. The timing and the language that got put in section 14. I agree with you, Senator Sears. So we've got that doesn't fit very well.
I'd like to reserve the 20 million and see where we're at in April when we're doing the final budget. I think putting it out there now, and it just allows us to say, well, we at least put 20 million extra aside, but as well as the rest of it. And then we don't deal with it till next year.
Well, somebody's got to bite the bullet on the retirement system. We've got to write what we have, but moving forward, I don't know how our children and their children are going to keep funding it. We keep adding more employees and more employees. And we've been putting a lot of money in there and it's bankrupting us as we go. So somebody's got to figure that system out and get it righted. You can't just keep throwing millions and millions and millions of dollars in that every year when we don't have it.
Well, we've got two things here and we've got to keep them separate. One of which is the pensions and the ADEC and associated with that. And then the other is your OPEB, which is predominantly healthcare, retired healthcare. So for teachers, we added, best we can determine was around 1999, we added that benefit of retired teachers' healthcare. It never got funded. So
it was going to take care of itself. Remember, it wasn't going to cost anything almost.
Well, we had two different things, one of which was underfunding the pensions for nearly 10 years, which we dealt with the amortization, and we've been paying those payments for the underfunding. But then we added the healthcare, which never got specifically funded. And so we have all of that is catching up with us. And I don't know how realistic, and I think probably the committee was doing the best they could to reserve the 20 million. But I think the section B is really going to be driven by what our government operations committees are moving forward, what the House is proposing, and the extent to which that helps us address that longer term cost and liability. So I think at a minimum, we know that we've got a lot more work to do there. The other part, I guess, and Adam, maybe you can answer this. Part of the underfunding, and for teachers, it grew by nearly $380 million from 21 to 22. And that was driven between demographic changes, and it was driven by, and the other thing, which I want to remind people, is these pension funds are really administered by a board. The legislature doesn't. And so there was and then the investment return assumptions that turned out to be too high. And so the question I have is, when there's an underfunding like that, because the ADEC is too low, is that underfunding 100% always defaults to the general fund?
No, it does, for all intents and purposes, in the teacher's portfolio, which is predominantly, not 100%, but predominantly general fund. The normal cost for the teacher's portfolio, as you're aware, is paid out of the ed fund.
I know.
The
I know
unfunded
that.
liability and the pension portfolio is funded out of the general fund. So for the teachers, 99% of it defaults to the general fund. For the state employees, that's funded by all funds. So the general fund's about 40% of it, but the T fund is.
No, I guess what I'm asking is the split between employee and employer. If assumptions are made and they turned out to be too low, is there, that relationship, does that all that underfunding right now would fall either to the general fund or for state employees, all the different funding streams?
That is correct. There's no risk sharing in that. It is entirely, the general fund and the other funds are backstopping these pension plans.
Yeah. Okay. There's no risk sharing on that.
No,
And the other thing, when we moved the normal cost of teachers' retirement to the education fund, we never thought about or anticipated what happens if that ADEC is too low and underfunding occurs. So we've dealt with the underfunding when we deliberately didn't pay the ADEC, but the question becomes one of, for that underfunding for the period of time after we move the normal education responsibility and that ADEC is too low and there's underfunding, where does that liability fall, or the responsibility?
It's fallen on the state funds.
Right now, yeah.
That is correct.
Okay. And that's really a question of for when we true up, the amount of true up, and whether that truing up should, if there's a price tag, should that in fact be part of the normal retirement that is addressed through the education fund?
Right.
It should be.
Yeah.
Yes, Bobby?
Yeah, Adam, have you looked at what other states have done or what they are doing, and how their retirement systems are they in the shape we're in with theirs? I know some cities have gone bankrupt over it.
Right. A handful of states, more than a handful. I mean, I don't know, maybe a dozen states are actually in worse shape than we are. Some of them are, near or neighbors like New Jersey, Connecticut, and Massachusetts, Illinois, and so on. But a number of states are doing better than we are. So we're, I don't think we're the biggest sinner, but we're certainly not a saint. What I would say is that we've looked quite carefully at what other states have done, and it's, it would be a long meeting if you want to go through it. Many states, with 50 states, there are probably 30 different approaches. Some have straight DB, some have a mixture of defined benefit, defined contribution. Many of them have integrated profit sharing or risk sharing into it. So it's all over the map, really.
There's no good plan then to to kind of look at and follow.
No, that's not true. That's what the treasurer has been trying to work with to make some modifications to address those outer year costs. But ultimately, the legislature's got to approve them. And that's where the GovOps committees are focusing their work.
Right.
And I don't know whether, Becca, there's going to be a bill from the House before crossover, or they need more time on it.
There will be a bill. It may not make the crossover deadline, but that's the one bill I feel like we need to give them the time that they need. So
Yeah.
the goal is to get something that each chamber can sign on to before the end of the session. So,
Good.
Yeah.
And right now, in this fiscal year, between the pensions and the OPEB payments, 13% of the general fund is going for those costs. Just to give you some idea of what it means.
That's pretty bad.
Well, when you grow the underfunding by 380 million in 1 year,
Yeah.
that's huge.
But there's something wrong with that picture, though, to have it cost that. We didn't make any money on our investments because they were messed up. There's something that really went the heck there.
Yeah, it raises the question about truing up and not waiting for 5 years. I would suggest we actually review those ADEC
Every
contributions for
year.
accuracy on the assumptions every year.
Yeah.
This idea, because I cannot believe that we for teachers, the normal cost went from about 7.1 million to 38. We know there was underfunding in that intervening period of time, and all that underfunding liability is falling to the general fund right now.
Well, and your point is, I think, extremely well taken.
Yeah.
The ed fund, when did the cost of retirement for a teacher, it is an educational expense, and the general fund shouldn't be saddled with that total cost.
Well, the question we are going to have to consider, and that is, should the, just like the cost right now for currently employed teachers, the funding of their healthcare coverage or benefit after they retire, should that be treated as an ed fund expenditure the same as the pension?
Yep.
And that's about $14 million out of the budget base is attributable to those costs of healthcare for currently employed teachers that will be needed to fund the benefit when they retire.
So Madam Chair, may I just want to make one comment, just because I know this is a place where the governor and I disagree. And I just didn't want Commissioner Gresham's comment to go unnoted, which is, I don't feel that pre-funding is a waste of time or money, because we know it saves us time over the long run. And I know the governor and I disagree on that, but I just want to make it clear that as much money as we can pre-fund, that we can bear to do that, it is going to save us money in the long run.
Mm-hmm. It does save. There's no question. What we're struggling is what is a reasonable response, because it's much broader than we're hearing from many employees, and the answer is simply we want to stay. Everything should stay the same, and should. The answer is just raise more revenues to support it. But at 13%, it's already a pretty significant portion of the general fund. And that is before we get into the guaranteed increases of 10% or whatever out of years. So,
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I don't, in light of the pro tem's comment, I don't think the governor's ever said that pre-funding is not a good idea. I think he has prioritized getting our pension funds straightened out and sustainable, but I don't think he's ever said that pre-funding is not a good idea. He's certainly willing to work towards that. But, you know, I think our view on that is that it should be part of a larger package that also sets the pension plan on the right course.
Right. Yeah.
I'm happy to hear that, Commissioner. I feel like a few moments ago, you seemed to imply that the position was it was putting good money after bad, and maybe I'm paraphrasing.
The 20, the reference to the 20 million.
Exactly,
Yeah.
that's
Mhm.
exactly right. And so I want to be clear that we are thinking about this similarly, because I think that's a helpful place for us to be starting from. Of course, there has to be structural change, but we also know if there is money that can be freed up, especially given the federal funds, for us to dedicate more to this, you know, huge liability, then we ought to try to do as much as we can.
I think we are in agreement on that.
But it's a package. I think that's really
Yeah.
what we're struggling with here. And also looking at whether, and I don't expect the response would be too much different than when we move normal cost of teachers' retirement, but to do the same for the healthcare costs, post-employment to the education fund, because the argument is pretty much the same. The number of teachers, the hiring, the salary, the whatever is really all done locally, and it's part of our educational system. It's just some of these never have been consciously discussed. And we added the healthcare and funded it out of the underfunded pension, which only compounded our problem. So, okay. We are almost through this, and it's 20 of 4. I don't know, do people want to call it a day or keep plugging along?
You're the boss.
All right. Well, then
Let's keep going.
why don't we keep going, and hopefully we can get through it by 4 o'clock. And then tomorrow, Dick, we would want to take up and see if we can spin out S16.
Right,
And
good.
also we'll check on S15 about adding the position. Stephanie, if you could get that information so we can get those 2 bills
Yes.
out. Okay, so why don't we keep going to section 15? And that is the connectivity and line extension. And our finance committee is recommending spending more money, but I'm going to ask them to reconsider it in light of the new federal bill that seems to be really focusing a lot of money on broadband, because they were proposing to spend some of the general fund. We had 2 pieces, unexpended CRF money, which was about 3.2 million, and moving that out. And the House moved 2.2 of it out. Senate Finance actually wanted to move all 3.2 plus some additional general fund, because the governor had proposed more money for broadband. But the federal bill is really going to have greater funding for broadband. So this is what the House did, and our finance committee is proposing, and I sent that out to everybody, a higher level of spending than the House has in the bill. Bobby, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I thought Peter told us that they were doing an infrastructure bill behind this bill that they're working on right now that was going to have major money in it for broadband. And didn't he tell us that last Thursday? That they were doing an infrastructure bill that, you know, that was going to be coming for roads and broadband and rail and everything else in the world. Yeah.
All I know is the bill that they just passed has money for broadband.
Oh, it's earmarked for that?
And
It's an allowed use under the.
it's an allowed use.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Under the local
Because-
and capital.
Which
I-
would be a considerable, we're talking about, maybe $100 million that we could use out of this new slug of money. So the
Well-
question really, or I don't know, whatever we decide, it's going to be up to us, but it's a permissible use. And I'm not sure that it comes with the constraints that we had with the CRF money.
See, because some places were ready to go with broadband, but there's a lot of places, like we were talking a week or 2 weeks ago about they're fighting over who owns the poles and we can't put wire on the poles. And I mean, we've got to get all that straightened out before we go hog wild and
Well,
run into road.
my question though is, what should we do in the fast track bill, knowing that this is going to be a much larger discussion within the
Later.
next couple weeks? And so I'm saying that this is what the House proposed, which was essentially keeping within the available CRF money and continuing, which they couldn't do because of the deadline that came in with the CRF money. And so this is what they're proposing. Our Senate Finance is much higher. And I think it begs the question about, should we be looking at this, a broadband proposal in a much more long-term and a much more expansive context with the money that's now become available. And so I'm going to just suggest that we not spend any more time on this, because I think the landscape has changed a lot since the House passed this bill.
Definitely.
And so let's move on. Okay, this is ag, and I think this is just releasing all the general fund to working lands.
Just so people are aware that might be following this from our website, the version that's passed by the House is different from the one that's in front of us. I was looking at yeah.
It is?
In what way,
Yes.
Senator Sears, what are you seeing different?
Well, I looked on our web page. H315 as passed by the House only has 16 pages.
No, it's the same. I just cut and pasted into your working document as a Senate amendment, but it's the exact same language. It's just formatted a bit differently.
Okay, I can't find anything about pensions. I'll follow on yours, but it's people that are watching may not find anything. Excuse me, not pensions, on that last subject that we were just on.
On section
Broadband.
15?
Yeah,
Oh.
It should be the same, just formatted differently. I'm taking a look right now as well.
section 15 is missing.
No,
No?
it's there on the posted version, and then I have it in our version. So
No, it's not. I'm sorry. Not on my posted version.
okay. Here's
Doesn't matter. Just
Okay.
missing.
Apologies for the confusion.
No problem.
All I know is I printed off H315 off our website, off the legislative website, and it's exactly the same. But what would we have posted that wouldn't? I don't know.
I don't know. Take a look at on the committee webpage. Stephanie Barrett, H315 has passed the House. Doesn't have section 15. It's no big deal.
Huh.
I'll take a look when you're done, but right now you should be okay to keep reviewing.
Okay. So we're going to move on to section 16. And we had talked about, out of the working lands, they put all 3 million into grants, but whether we wanted to designate a certain amount of the 3 million to go for slaughterhouses. And we had talked about 500,000 of that 3 million.
Is that where we were going to move 250 to the
This is, you're talking about for the soil improvement?
yes.
yeah, this is probably where we would put it, if we were to add that. There are a number of things that we wanted to add, like releasing money from A&R for brownfields. So we have a number of things that, this is only what the House has. So the question is, they wanted to do 3 million for foods and market out of working lands. We had said, let's allocate 500,000 of that 3 million specifically for the slaughterhouse grants.
And 250 for ecosystems.
Do you want it out of that 3 million, or do you want it, should we appropriate that separately?
Well, we should do that separately, but the
Okay.
other should come out of this.
Okay. So we'll add but the 250 is on our list of things to consider. So do you want to raise that now, 250? And that would be general fund.
Yeah, that would be for the ecosystems working group to get started on building better and stronger soils for water quality and growing.
So what would the 250 actually give us? Does it fund projects? I hope it's more than a working group.
Well, yeah, it's to get the project started. He thought they would be ready to roll come good weather, you know. Abby, I think it was Abby that sent the letter over on that.
Do you have language?
She didn't send language to put in the bill, but sent what it was going to be used for and
So I guess we need to have that, Bobby. It's
Is that up-
250.
Is that up on the committee page for Senate Ag? We can grab it from there. If do you know if you posted it on your committee page, Senator Starr?
yeah.
Oh, I'll try and find it that way.
So you think it's on your committee webpage?
I think Linda put it on there. If not, I'll have her do it tomorrow or get it over to us.
Okay. I know I've got your letter here somewhere. I copied it.
Maybe Richie picked it up. I don't know, I don't know if you guys can even hear me, but my iPad keeps screwing up.
Oh, we can
Cuts
hear
out and
you.
then back in.
Hear you
We can hear you, Bobby.
and see you.
Oh, I was hoping you couldn't.
Oh. We'll look at the letter. We'll put
Yeah.
that on our list
Yeah.
of additional things, because we've got all that education funding that has come that we need to add. So let's keep going here. So we'll put in some language about out of that 3 million, the slaughterhouse
Yeah,
allocation.
that's really important to get those things rolling too.
All right, so then we have A&R, and that's 5 million for VOREC and 5 million to get going on their trails and network. I think people were looking positively about that
Yeah.
section and moving that money out, knowing
It's a
there's
good
advantage
deal.
of moving earlier. Okay. Then there's taxation, which we're going to have to get finance to take a look at that. And that was the federal rules relative to the PPP and not going retroactive and making Vermont changes that if we didn't want to follow the federal rules. So that's something that we're going to have finance take a look at it. Ann's very familiar with the purpose and the fact that to go back and have different state laws when we've been paralleling the federal laws is really it would be a bear to do. So we need to hold that for them. And effective dates. Okay. So what we have on our list is St. Joseph's language, that 27,000 that we wanted to add, Senator Sears. The slaughter capacity, which we just talked about, that we would add. Then we've got our education supports that were recommended, that we need to get some language that we will present to the committee. And that had to do with after-school programs. It had to do with the literacy, the training of teachers and teaching techniques. We had issue around, and I don't know if we've got the information yet, and that was the contract for the auditor's office, for the sheriff's stick. I don't know if we got anything yet. You're muted, so I can't hear a word you're saying.
We haven't heard anything yet from the auditor.
Okay, he was going to suggest what it might cost to do a contract for
Yeah.
to contract it out. All right, so we still need to get that.
You want me to
And-
send him an email or do you want somebody else?
Well, who was he going to provide that to? Was it just
I
joint
thought
fiscal?
to the committee, a joint fiscal committee, or
Okay,
to this committee. I don't mind writing him, but
okay. I think we need to just say we're waiting for
yeah,
an estimate on doing that. The brownfields on the A&R piece, I think we thought that was something that really could get moving relative to the A&R piece. The second year would be what the parts in the ACCD. And then the higher ed, we've got a couple of things that we need to consider. One was a request that was recommended to House Appropriations that would deal with a proposal to develop a model for the training of 40 LPNs working with Vermont State College, VTC, and our nursing home industry to help deal with the inadequate supply of nurses. And particularly, and I've talked with some of our hospital administrators, and they're saying LPNs and RNs are really where the need is. Advanced practice nurses, physician's assistants are not as in short supply as the LPNs and the 2-year registered nurse. I think it's 2-year program. So we have a proposal that the House Healthcare Committee, but they also they had bundled it with tuition and scholarships and stuff. And so the House Committee did not want to do that. But the request was for us to consider moving that nursing pilot proposal ahead so that the infrastructure could be set up and the planning to take advantage of it. And it was 1.8 million to pay the tuition and the necessary expenditures. The nursing homes would arrange for the, which is always a problem, and that's the clinical supervision and placement. 40 LPNs would be a fairly significant number of nurses relative to our nursing shortage. And the nursing homes right now are paying $125 an hour for traveling nurses. So
Yes.
the cost of an adequate, and the beauty of this is it expands the supply rather than, which is really the underlying problem. That's why everybody's competing, offering incentives, et cetera, because we are not generating enough nurses. So this would actually expand our programs. And so I don't know what we want to do in terms of more testimony on that. Rich, you were looking at it. I know the whole shortage of nurses, and that study that was done about a year ago was just very compelling.
Very.
And I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that. The
I
only,
haven't, but except for what we looked at it in the committee, I will.
and Phil, have you taken a look at that at all?
At the nurse program?
Yeah,
No, I haven't yet.
did I send it out to everybody?
I don't think I got it.
I don't, but we briefly looked at it in committee.
Okay. The one thing that I really don't have a good sense of is included in the proposal, knowing that if they had to take time off to the cost of, time off from work. And so there was a payment to the students. And at that point, they were proposing a $10,000 kind of a wage replacement up to that amount. I don't know if that's reasonable. I don't have a good sense of that. So I was wondering if Rich and Phil, you could take a look at that in terms
Sure.
of what the proposal is. But if you don't have a copy of it, I guess I need to make sure you do have it. Chrissy, did I send that on to you?
Checking my emails right now.
I would say that's generous. I can't remember a program that paid people to go to school in addition to subsidizing the schooling. Usually it's a stipend in exchange for some kind of work or, not that I oppose it, it's just,
Mhm.
it's a generous provision.
Yeah, I was wondering if perhaps it was a little on the high side. It's up to, but I think maybe we could take a look at it. I am a strong proponent of growing our programs and expanding capacity and providing access. And for people who are maybe at the entry level in our care facilities, whether it's hospitals or nursing homes, if they're interested and they're here in Vermont, it's wonderful to take some of our own potential that are here and helping grow our supply, which to me is important.
I would say that if there was an area to be generous, it would be here.
Yeah.
And I particularly would say that because that report that came out last year, if I'm not incorrect, but what my memory is that if we could eliminate traveling nurses at the point that that report was constructed, it would reduce cost in our hospitals just of $70 million a year. So
it's a huge cost. There's no question, and it's being experienced. Bobby was talking about our visiting nurses, whether it's home health, VNA, to our nursing homes, to our hospitals, to our just throughout our whole healthcare delivery system. That would be one area. I think that's a variation or an expansion on what Senate Ed was proposing, which was to also do what we did last spring, and that was through the Vermont State College. But I was suggesting that maybe we should do it to UVM as part of our public education, where unemployed Vermonters could take a course, and we had over 900 Vermonters take advantage of that. So that to me is workforce development. But the other, if we could start developing some of these model nursing programs and building capacity and the partnerships with where the placements can occur, because the clinical placements seem to be a very significant challenge.
And I support all of these ideas. I think they also have secondary benefits for the state colleges and higher ed generally. I am wondering, and maybe Richie knows the answer to this. I always thought we were in competition for nurses with New York in particular. Is that the case that because I worry that we would heavily subsidize a group of nurses, say 40, and then they find it more lucrative to go to New York once they've got their credentials in hand. And
Oh, I
know
think
that-
we have to have some kind of commitment to employment for a period of time.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's my only
That's,
question.
every plan that's out there asks for a commitment.
Okay.
And the shining place in the state that seems to have done the most with it is the hospital in Bennington, who has a program where they pay for much of the tuition for the nurses to go. What was at Southern Vermont and now is at Castleton. So, but the problem we hear is there aren't enough people out there to teach teachers. Or to teach nurses in the school, and that's what's hampering us. But we are dramatically, I think the number out of the 25,000 teachers, we're nearly 9,000 short. It's a
9,000
catastrophe.
9,000 short in nursing or?
Yes.
overall teaching?
Yes, because the way we're covering it is overtime and we're covering it with overtime and we're covering it with traveling nurses to a level that is just unbelievable. I'll get the report and bring it back around for all.
It was the study that was done. There was a whole review with rural health short workforce, and the nursing was just astronomical. And of
I will
course,
get it to
we're not
Christy.
getting any younger as a state, so I imagine the demand is not going to diminish. And so
I thought it was
these are long-term investments because if you're starting out and you're getting your starting as LPN, you can move up, but we're talking about people that'll be in the healthcare workforce, I'm sure, for a long time, several decades.
I thought it was 2,000 nurses, Rich.
I thought it was about like that,
But
2,000.
let me get the numbers for you and the report.
Whatever it is, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So it's,
We were talking that the 40 was great, but we needed 50 times that many or something there before we went on break. But you've got to have the infrastructure to be able to get them educated.
so what I was thinking is what we would do is similar to what we did in the spring relative to the workforce that we had, that over 900 people took courses or certificate opportunities. At that point, it was Vermont State College, but I think we could add a little bit more money and allow the courses to be taken. There might be some special courses at the University of Vermont that people would help upskill, for example, or in a particular area, and then look at supporting this pilot to really start making some inroads to increase our capacity and the output of nurses here. And it really is a grow your own. If you're taking people that are that I've forgotten what are they? They're not underneath the LPN. They go through a certification program, and a VTC actually runs one.
Yeah. Is there a program in Burlington, the VTC?
What?
Don't they have a nursing program in?
Oh yeah, they have a big one. This would be
Yeah.
with VTC and the other state college partners
Yeah.
throughout
But
the
they have
state.
a 99% job placement on
I'm
their
sure.
last graduates. Something else that we ought to be trying to do on education is getting some of these young men that are graduating from high school to go on to college somehow. I mean, it's really pathetic that we ain't getting squat, and they should be enticed somehow to
Well, that's the
go
whole
on to hire,
thinking.
some kind of a program.
Well, that was why the Education Committee wanted to continue that, what the McClure Foundation did with CCV to allow that kind of connection,
Yeah.
as well as, maybe the certain amount of free classes. So I think it was a combination of trying to get current high school seniors connected and with the higher ed system. And then the other was for people who are unemployed to really give them an opportunity to either take courses or certification programs. And then we have this nursing proposal specifically to deal with geriatric nursing, which has been a real shortage area.
Bobby's right, and the dual enrollment program suffers from the same thing. It's
Yep.
two-thirds female in the uptake. And,
Mhm.
I have daughters. I'm glad to see, girls growing up to be ambitious and getting their foot in the door for that higher ed, but we're missing the young men in the high school system somehow on dual enrollment in particular.
Well, your daughters ain't gonna find any husbands there if there's no parents.
Maybe they'll find wives.
Actually,
you never know.
My oldest daughter is not in the market for a man, so.
Well, I referenced it the other day and it was immediately available. It was an article in the New England Journal of Higher Education. It was called Failure to Launch. And it talks about how ill-served are the way in which we teach, particularly our boys, very much seat-based, and they're much more experiential, and also just the developmental age spread to some extent. So the data is overwhelming that the way in which we teach and the way our young men are suffering is of broad concern, and how to get them engaged, but also to make education relevant. And my son, he told me in 8th grade, the problem with school is there's not enough experiential learning. And I was like, well, good, I'll be sure. But when you grow up on a farm and, that's all experiential learning, and not everybody has an opportunity for that. But boys learn differently, and so much of our, I think, geez, Phil, maybe you've got this on your topic, but it seems to me that the research suggests that 60% of all students, regardless of gender, learn more effectively in an experiential and applied learning environment.
I think it's undeniable. Like the whole setup we have is Victorian. We developed it in England in the Victorian period, and the idea was people should sit down and shut up and listen to their elders. And we still have that in our classrooms by and large.
Mm-hmm.
You know what our forefathers did to those British, don't you, Phil?
Madam Chair,
So yes, Rich.
are you done your list? Because I have one thing to add.
Well, we still have, I have pretty well done my list, and we've added the diapers already. And Dick has sent on the, and so Bobby's going to get us more on that soil health initiative. So I think if you have something else to add, and then it's a little after 4, and I think probably people are about headed for today.
It would be that language change for DMV, because they have not been able to offer. They suspended during COVID the ability for young people to get their license. And there's a requirement that if you got a learner's permit, that within a year you have to get your license, or your you have to start over to get your permit again. And so these kids are sitting there because there's no driver's test that they can take. So the request is going to be that we give them more time.
But didn't they do that already?
No,
Apparently, this was the one thing that got left out, Alice,
Oh.
with all the DMV related
Wow.
And-
extensions, or, you know, you didn't have to appear in person, et cetera. So, this is a COVID-19 bill, and it seems to me that if there's some way we can recognize the fact that these kids are, would not have to start over. Probably the best person to draft it is Anthea.
yeah, I did speak with the chair of the House Transportation Committee. She said she didn't have a problem. She said she was going to speak to the speaker, and I will try to get something drafted.
Okay, but you're talking about using this fast track bill as a way
Yes,
to deal with
absolutely.
the fact that
Yep.
these kids are going to have the year expire, and we don't want them to start all over because they can't.
Right.
They
Okay.
can't take the, if they can't take the test, they can't take the test.
Yeah.
Who's the chair of House Transportation?
Diane
What?
Lamper.
Diane
Oh,
Lamper.
it's not? Oh my goodness, they
Kurt
changed.
McCormick isn't well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Mhm. So if you want to give us some language, it seems to me it's very much COVID related, and we want to have these kids not have to start all over through no fault of their own. And it's just something that I don't think ever got identified until the year kind of came up and people realized what a problem it
Well, there's
is.
a lot of those problems out there during this pandemic with motor vehicles, you know,
Okay.
people getting there, you know, it falls by the wayside because you've got so many other issues.
Right.
But, you know, getting the real ID so you can get on a plane,
Mhm.
for example, is another one that maybe somebody.
Mm.
We've had our pickup registration in there for 4 months and no registration. They cashed the check, but no registration.
Well, as long as they cash the check, Bobby, you know,
Yeah,
you're safe.
hell, the truck runs just as good without a sticker as it did with a sticker.
And you don't
So-
even need a license plate on the farm.
So any other things that people want to add today? Otherwise, we have chairs at 5.
Oh, great.
So people,
Some chairs needed a little bit more time this week with the crossover deadline, so that's why we're going at 5.
okay.
So did we get the boys straightened out, or how are we gonna get the boys to go to college?
What boys?
All the boys.
Well,
All the
You
boys.
remember Peter Shumlin had that program that he called Man Up?
Yeah.
Oh,
And he wanted to pilot a program for just these kind of folks, but it didn't go anywhere. It
I
wasn't.
guess that
You
was
know-
one of those days I wasn't paying attention to someone.
You know how.
It was the
Peter
inauguration, I think.
Oh, I guess I wasn't listening.
okay. I think though, it does raise the question that Appropriations Committee a couple of times did pour more money into Conservation Corps and those kinds of opportunities for our youth to get job experience, to get the mentoring, get the workplace skills. And I think maybe, Bobby, your comment triggers that maybe there's some opportunities to expand those opportunities for youth that really need that chance. It's sort of a variation of the CCC, and maybe there's going to be something more, but I think we could maybe
Do
not keep that on our list, that we've got some youth here,
You know,
many of them really talented, but they need to have, and the transportation was the big problem for a lot of the kids from the families with more limited income to participate. So I think we should put that on our list, and that I think we've got too many, what I would call the forgotten youth. We've got the forgotten kingdom, but I think we've got a group of Vermont youth that maybe could benefit from these expanded opportunities.
Absolutely.
And I don't know, but you know, I see a lot of them, talk with a lot, really, really nice young men, you know, and, you know, they're dubbing off, you know, doing part-time jobs and things instead of going and getting a little education, even if they learn to be a plumber or a carpenter.
Oh,
You know,
even, my
these
gosh, that's
trades
one of
are-
your better paying occupations.
Yeah, you can't find anybody.
It
And
might be
got the
right up there
plumber's
with a
bill
college
lately, Bobby?
professor, Philip.
Yeah, don't become a professor. That's
Yeah, uh-huh, uh-huh.
Well,
So
I've got-
Chrissy
I
seems
had
to be
two
wanting to
guys-
give me a signal.
Well, first I want to apologize to Senator Sears. He was absolutely correct. It got all wonky online and now it's posted correctly. So thank you, Senator
Thank
Sears.
you.
Oh,
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. And then just indicate when you're ready to go off live.
so I think unless we've just
Half an
added one
hour
more
ago.
thing to our list, then I think we're ready to
Okay.
give people a break before we start our 5 o'clock. And we'll see if we can get some more information. And we're also gonna take up those two bills tomorrow. And then as much as we can, budget work and see what we can do about getting this bill out. I'm hoping, I'm not sure that we can finish it by Friday, but I really would like to get it out if we can early next week. And then we can move on because there's a lot more appropriating to be done. So thanks, everyone. First
Thank
day
you.
back.
Bye-bye.
Our week off was not a week off. And Philip and Rich, if you can just take a look at that nursing proposal.
Yeah, I did. I